On April 24, 2015, Armenians around the world solemnly commemorated the 100th anniversary of the genocide of 1.5 million innocents living in their ancestral homeland. The presentation you are about to view occurred in Fresno, California at St. Paul's Armenian Church with an attendance of 1,200 concerned individuals, each of whom lost family and relations, and who gathered together represent the progeny of those few who managed to survive the cruelty and horrors. The larger story is also captured in this book, which goes beyond the genocide to tell the story of who the Armenians really were, how they were instrumental in the development of Western Europe, and how Europe and the West turned away at the critical time of massacre and total destruction, and why they turned away. But don't despair, because this book tells the story of how Armenia's past saves the future of the world. Reverend clergy, distinguished and honored guests, and ladies and gentlemen. In April 1915, a small group of children set out from an orphanage in Oakland, California, to visit the Pan-Pacific exhibition in San Francisco. The event celebrated the opening of the Panama Canal and a bright future of opportunity for the United States. For one 5-year-old boy, it also afforded the chance to glimpse his mother, whom he knew to be working at the fair selling souvenirs at that time. While that time was filled with excitement and hope, something far more sinister and horrifying was unfolding on the other side of the world in a place called Turkey, and to a people the little boy named William Saroyan would soon come to represent in his new hometown of Fresno, a people called the Armenians. My name is Bruce Janigian, and like William Saroyan, I am enormously proud to be from this race or tribe, as he sometimes referred to us. I still have my black armband from marching in San Francisco on the way to Grace Cathedral for the 50th commemoration of the genocide, and an armband that says 75th anniversary that I wore speaking and introducing Governor George Deukmejian on the Capitol steps in Sacramento. In the 15 minutes allotted to me this evening, I promise not to recapitulate the dreadful events that began on April 24th, 1915, with the murder of Armenian intellectuals in Constantinople, today's Istanbul. Nor am I going to recapitulate the 11,600-year-old history of our ancient race, one that goes back into the mists of Neolithic prehistory. Yes, you heard that figure correctly. We have monuments 7,000 years older than the Great Pyramids of Giza. Let me just say that the achievements of ancient Armenia show it to very possibly be the earliest and most advanced civilization on the planet. You know, Lord Byron learned the Armenian language well enough to write books in it. He said he was convinced that God speaks to the world in the Armenian language. He was also of the opinion that the biblical narrative of a particular chosen people was actually not the correct one. Lord Byron felt the Armenians were the people chosen by God, and that the story of Abraham should have been replaced with the story of Noah and his grandson Haik, whose lineage was provided to afford the world an opportunity for redemption. That is us, by the way, since Haik is the founder of our tribe. Mount Ararat is central to who we are as a people, and perhaps even why we are on this earth. Mount Ararat must be, and one day shall be, returned to Armenia. I'm delighted that Jeffrey Robertson and others are calling for this at a bare minimum. The real history of the Armenians has yet to be told. Indeed, I have labeled this talk this evening, "The Greatest Story Never Told." The future of the Armenian people has yet to be written, despite the ongoing efforts of those who would be rid of the very last one of us. Yes, even we here gathered together this evening. The president of Azerbaijan has publicly stated that all diasporan Armenians are the enemy of his country, to be dealt with accordingly. It is not surprising that his foreign minister has labeled my wife and I as persona non grata, a label we wear most proudly for being election monitors in the very democratic, independent Republic of Nagorno-Karabakh. And before I continue, let me just say that recognition of the genocide of the Armenians should be accompanied by condemnation of the ongoing illegal blockade of Armenia by Turkey and by full diplomatic recognition of the brave new nation of Artsakh, a nation that had to fight to be free of the tyranny of Turkic rule and whose people still live in fear every day of cowardly sniper bullets and worse. So, I am not going to restate what I have written about the lost history of Armenia and what I consider to be the underlying cause of the genocide, which is presented in my new novel, by the way, called Persona non grata, End of the Great Game. Rather, what I intend to focus on is what is being omitted in all the many articles written about the action of the Ottomans against the Armenians. Because, as bad as the Ottomans were, and Sultan Abdul Hamid was an absolute monster, it is not the Ottomans who perpetrated the most horrible deed of all. Of course, the Ottomans referred to us as raya, cattle, to be pushed, prodded, and occasionally slaughtered, especially when the cattle got up the nerve to ask for something like more humane treatment. Let everyone point to the Ottomans as the culprits of the Armenian genocide. But modern Turkey knows what's at stake, because the most heinous act of all, the calculated decision to eliminate the entire race of Armenians, was at the core of the creation of modern Turkey and carried out by those honored as among the founders of modern Turkey and those who have ruled Turkey while receiving billions of dollars of investment and support from the West, including this great nation of ours. In all the discussions of the Ottomans, please consider this. The greatest destruction of Armenian churches and cultural artifacts, including dynamiting, pouring urine on churchgoers, and otherwise desecrating our legacy and life within a homeland we built and took to the highest level of civilization, that greatest destruction has occurred since 1950, since I was born. And it hasn't been limited to the Armenians, but has extended to all Christians under the watchful eyes of this nation, among others, I might add. So you might consider the case of Jalal Bayar, the third president of modern Turkey. In 1913, as a member of the Young Turks Committee of Union and Progress, he led the terror campaign against the Greeks, driving them from their homes and killing 300,000 or so. Well, that was then, you might say. But in 1955, as president of the modern Turkey, guess what he did? He ordered pogroms against the Greeks once again in 1955. And this man was summoned to the White House. Why? To be awarded a medal. Or consider the second president of modern Turkey, İsmet İnönü. He was the financial brains of the Young Turk movement and helped plan the extermination of the Armenians, and I would speculate, obtained clandestine funding and approval from certain Western powers. He was president from 1938 until 1950. Jalal Bayar continued the rule of the blood-soaked former Turks until 1960. He didn't die until 1986. Or consider the first president of modern Turkey. Everyone knows Mustafa Kemal, most commonly called Ataturk. He was also a young Turk and up to his eyeballs in the extermination of the Armenians. In 1918, in the closing days of World War I, after the deportations, crucifixions, beheadings, and other mass executions, he ordered his armies to go eastward into lands that were not even Ottoman to find and destroy any remaining Armenians. After all, the children or the relatives of the murdered, if they were surviving, might seek retribution. Every last Armenian had to be killed. Better to kill every last one. If the ragtag army of survivors pulled together at Sardarapat near Yerevan didn't hold the line, there would be no Armenia today, or anything called modern Armenians. Our incredible history and our present and our future would have been safely stolen away for all time. But we don't die so easily, do we? The war ended in November of 1918. Consider also that the burning of Smyrna, modern Izmir, occurred in 1922. The Greek and Armenian quarters were set ablaze and fleeing men, women, and children forced into the sea to drown. This occurred amidst observing U.S. and British warships in the harbor. Our warships were under orders not to rescue anyone swimming and drowning. I knew a bishop who told the story of his being taken aboard and hidden as a small child by an American sailor who risked a court-martial for his temerity. If the 1955 pogroms are still too old or unclear to you, think about them as the model for the pogroms against the Armenians in Sumgait and Baku in 1988. The perpetrators are called into action by the government, the police do nothing, and justice is never even attempted. If 1988 is still too far back in time, look at the findings of the European Court of Human Rights in 2010, which concluded that Turkey violated Hrant Dink's right to life by not acting to prevent the murder and by not punishing the police for inaction. Now ask yourself, who still doesn't recognize the genocide? And then ask, why? As I tell everyone who is interested, read my book. My central character is outraged when he discovers the British Museum has no representation of Armenia, only ancient Turkey. There is no such thing. It is a modern warrior state that conquered those who gave life and meaning to the lands it conquered. And it subjected to the Armenians to a cruelty that was as despicable as it was fully known in the West. Please consider that Western Europe would not have emerged without the Armenians. Yet it was Western Europe that left the Armenians to their cruel fate. The British Empire was built only with the welcoming guidance of the Armenian merchant princes of India, who controlled the trade of much of the Middle East and Central Asia, going all the way back to the days when Armenians accompanied Alexander the Great to these regions. Yet, when Gladstone wanted to help the Armenians, Disraeli's notions of realpolitik spelled aiding Turkey instead, and going to war with Turkey on its side against the country that wanted to save its fellow Christians. And I'm sorry to say, the notions of realpolitik still control the West today. So, what else isn't being reported? I'm a lawyer, and accessories after the fact are also guilty of a crime. Every time Turkish officials deny the genocide, using the very same language that was used while the crime was being committed, they are accessories after the fact. When they condemn those righteously seeking justice, your blood should boil. If they or their agents made those statements in Switzerland or France today, they face arrest. After all, it is against the law to deny the Holocaust, and it is now also against the law in these countries to deny the Armenian genocide. The same logic applies to both monstrous crimes against humanity. The laws making criminal the denial of the genocide should apply in Britain and this country as well. So what is the price of denial, cover-up, and failure to provide justice? We all know that Hitler felt emboldened enough by the lack of justice for the Armenians to launch his Holocaust, and maybe all the other genocidal carnage that followed and still continues. When I shared with my son graphic photos of the cold-blooded murders of Christian families in the Middle East today, I apologized to him, saying that my generation let him down. We should never again have to see images that look like what our grandparents or great-grandparents witnessed. It's a tragedy upon a tragedy. For the Armenians, the failure to have even the decency of recognition and a meaningful apology is the desecration of the memory of the 1.5 million innocents who were taken, and a supreme insult to the scars born of the survivors and their progeny. Pope Francis said it so well. It is allowing a wound to continue to bleed without providing a bandage. How much longer must we bleed? How much longer must we bleed? How much longer? God bless all our martyrs and safeguard all memories of them forever. And God bless all of you. Thank you.